everyone. Thrilled to have you here today. I know your choices were either coming to the Wharf Room at the Boston Harbor Hotel or heading to Vatican City, where apparently white smoke has emerged. We will save that excitement for later. We won't announce that here on stage now. But truly, we welcome you. It was famous Lakota Sioux leader and wise man Sitting Bull who said, "Let us put our minds together and build a better life for our children." Let us put our minds together to build a better life for our children. As someone who remains a symbol of Native American resiliency and leadership, he knew that a long-term collaborative approach was the best investment in society's future. And perhaps it might provide a roadmap for the future of healthcare. On behalf of Boston College, the Carroll School of Management, the chair of our board, John Fish, welcome to the Boston College Chief Executives Club. Sitting Bull's words call for unity and shared purpose, whose message resonates deeply with the mission of modern healthcare. Today, ensuring the well-being of future generations requires that those in the healthcare system work together to help prioritize access, equity, and innovation. Just as Sitting Bull envisioned a collective responsibility to shape a better future for our children, so too can the healthcare sector collaboratively design a healthier, more sustainable world for those who come after us. And I suspect we will hear about some of that progress being made on today's stage. Based on some of the accents you probably heard as you were mingling during this event, you may have noticed a slight Irish brogue to many of our guests. We would like to welcome those who have come from Ireland as part of the Boston College Ireland Business Council that was established in 2016 to enhance relationships, promote transatlantic trade, and to continue to engage between our two countries and our two cities. So we welcome those of you who made the trip across the pond. I encourage everybody to engage, to spend some time, to learn, and to make some new friends. We gather for our last event of the year in this room on June 17th, when Roger Crandall, the CEO of Mass Mutual, will serve as host for our final keynote speaker of the year, the Global Managing Director of McKinsey & Company, Bob Sternfels. Then, after a brief summer hiatus, and it feels like it might be on its way here, we will come back in September and welcome M&T Bank's Renee Jones. Now, for today's business, of course, our host is Dr. Kevin Churchwell, the CEO of Boston Children's Hospital, where he provides leadership for a team that's dedicated to improving and advancing child health through their life-changing work in clinical care, research, innovation, medical education, and community engagement. He joined BCH in 2013 after a successful career at several other children's hospitals around the country. He's a graduate of MIT and the Vanderbilt Medical School. He completed his pediatric residency and a clinical fellowship in pediatric critical care at Boston Children's. He currently is an associate professor of pediatric anesthesia and the Robert and Dana Smith Associate Professor of Anesthesia at Harvard Medical School. Finally, of course, our keynote speaker is Robert Ford, the Chairman and CEO of Abbott, a global healthcare company with a leading portfolio of medical devices, diagnostics, nutritionals, and branded generic pharmaceuticals. The company operates in over 160 countries and services over 2 billion people a year with its products and technologies. Robert joined Abbott in 1996 while living in his home country of Brazil. Over the following 25 years, his talents took him to being named CEO in March of 2020. You might recall there was some excitement going on at that time as we were facing a global pandemic, so outstanding timing, Robert. A year later, in March of 2021, he joined me for a virtual conversation 6 feet apart while we discussed his leadership in Abbott's role in combating COVID and we're thrilled that he's come here today in front of a live audience, and candidly, a better person to conduct the interview than me. He's involved in several organizations that promote multi-sector collaboration in public policy, including the Business Roundtable, the U.S.-China Business Council, the U.S.-Brazil CEO Forum, and the Economic Club of Chicago. He got his MBA from the University of California, Berkeley, and most impressively of all, he is an alum of Boston College. Please welcome Kevin and Robert to our stage.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's pretty exciting. It's a great opportunity that I have to introduce and to talk with Robert for a few minutes. Love to hear his personal journey and also insights that he might want to provide in terms of what's happening in the world, what's happening at Abbott, and how it relates to what we do every day. So just a little bit more about Robert. Robert joined Abbott in 1996, starting his career with the company while living in his home in the country of Brazil. His first role was within the diabetes care business, a division he would later lead. He then became Executive Vice President of Medical Devices, where he led the company's integration of St. Jude's Medical in 2017. At the time, it was the largest acquisition. He was named President and Chief Operating Officer in 2018, with responsibility for the company's operating business. Now, Robert became CEO of Abbott in March of 2020. Great timing, Robert.
Yep.
Just as the COVID-19 pandemic was sweeping across the globe, he led the company's response as it developed the game-changing innovations to help healthcare professionals tackle COVID. Abbott created Binex Now, which is ubiquitous now. I don't think we think about it anymore, Robert, in terms of what it means and how we utilize it. As a fast and reliable rapid test that could be used on a mass scale. Much of the work to develop the test, was done in Chicago and came at a critical moment in the pandemic. Under Robert's leadership, Abbott's work in diagnostics played a fundamental role in slowing the spread of the disease. Now, Abbott has a long and storied history of putting science and innovation to work. During World War II, Abbott played a significant role in ramping up production of penicillin for wartime efforts. 4 decades later, it developed the first test for HIV. In 2014, Abbott launched its glucose monitoring system, revolutionizing diabetes care, and also they have developed treatment for chronic pain. Abbott also has a large science-based nutrition business and a branded generic medicine business. In an increasing complex healthcare environment, the company's focus remains on impact, helping people live fuller, healthier lives. So now we'll get started.
Okay, thanks for that. I would like to say, though, as a Morrissey guy who spent like 4 years trying to cross over to Carroll to be here at an event that from Carroll, like it's full circle round for me.
So let's keep going with that. Let's start with your personal story. How about you tell us a little bit about yourself, growing up in Brazil, and how that sort of shaped your life, and how BC has been part of shaping your life.
Sure, yeah. So I was born and raised in São Paulo, Brazil. People used to say, well, that's not a Brazilian name. Okay. My mother is American from Scranton, and my dad is a 4th-generation English person. They met somewhere between Scranton and Philadelphia. And, I grew up in a pretty diverse and kind of somewhat weird environment where I went to a British school. All my friends were Brazilian, and my mom was great because she made sure that I didn't lose any of American kind of values and important things. There was this weird Thursday in November that I didn't have to go to school and could just hang out at home and eat turkey. But it was a great environment, and I had an opportunity to apply to a lot of schools in Brazil, and somebody told me that a lot of universities in the United States welcome people from abroad, give a different perspective in the school, and I applied to a lot of schools, and the only one that said yes was BC, and I think I thank them for saying yes, and I think eventually they'll thank me also. But I would say, as I was just sharing now at the table, I think the biggest thing I learned from BC was the Jesuit tradition of service, and that has probably taken with me in terms of all of my professional life and leadership is really the idea of servant leadership. You're there for your employees, you're there for your customers, you're there for everybody first, and you're there for you last. And I think I learned a lot from that tradition in Boston College. So yeah. Went back, decided to go back to Brazil, and wasn't expecting to work in healthcare, and it was one of those, you've got 6 months before you're out of the house, and so I was just trying to find anything to help pay rent, and I got a shot at a healthcare company. I was given a job that I should not have been given, but I think, again, that Boston College degree on my resume kind of had some weight, even at that time, and so that's how I started.
And you've got 2 kids now at BC, right?
I have one kid who is finishing his sophomore year, and a second one who's going to be enrolling in September. So yeah.
So you know where the bookstore is, so that'll work out.
Yeah.
Just a little bit more about your experience at BC, and you talked about servant leadership. How have you worked to translate that education you receive to the work you do every day? How has it become sort of an important part of how you lead?
Like I said, I think we have a philosophy at Abbott, a lot of the long tenured, this will be my 30th year at Abbott, and next year. And I think the leaders that have had the biggest impact or stayed the longest are, I think, the ones who really embrace this idea of servant leadership, that you're there to really serve your team and serve the company, whether it's shareholders, it's patients, and I think that's really at the core of I think, how one, at least at Abbott, has become successful, is having that. And like I said, I learned a lot of that at BC in my classes, in the volunteer work that was happening already at the time, and that was instilled in me right from the beginning. So,
great. Now, under your leadership, Abbott is guided by a powerful mission to create life-changing technology, to offer more possibilities for more people through the power of health. How do you think about the human impact that Abbott can have?
Well, I think one of the things that we try to focus on a lot is kind of breadth and scale and having kind of big impact, which is why I think in the intro we mentioned 2 billion lives, because that's ultimately how I think we need to kind of measure ourselves. So we have a goal of getting to 3 billion people by 2030 that are interacting with our products and our services. And I think that that's one of the key challenges going forward, is to think about how do you make healthcare more accessible across the world. So I think that that's a very important part. The innovation is incredible. A lot of people here are probably aware of some of the things that are ongoing, whether it's in life sciences and in pharmaceuticals. It's just going to be incredible what we're going to see over the next 10 years. I think the danger is that we need to change how we think about how we launch these, how we roll these innovations out. And I think what I've tried to bring into Abbott is this idea that the reward we get to do this job is incredible, to get stories of patients' lives that get impacted every day, letters and all of that. So that's the number one reward you get. but the financial reward has got to change. Historically, the financial reward in healthcare is if you do something that nobody else has done, or you figured you've done something ahead, 3 years ahead of somebody else. Quite frankly, any kind of innovation reward, even outside of healthcare, tends to be you get to charge more, right? Like if you've got something that's better, you know, that's why it costs more, right? And I think that that's going to be the biggest change that at least I think innovators and manufacturers and researchers are going to have to think about. You're going to have to think about the reward being very different, and you're going to have to think about the reward not necessarily being a price reward, but much more a deeper penetration into the patient segment. And one of the greatest products that I'm most proud of is this glucose monitoring system that it's an incredible scientific breakthrough, and what our engineers did was just mind-blowing. But the most incredible part of it was that we decided to launch it at a price point that was a fraction, a seventh of what our competitor was, and the way we did it, it just completely opened up this category. It made this category a product with people with means that had money, and a niche to now a much broader population across the world that are benefiting from this. So I think that's going to be the ultimate move. Long-winded answer to that question, but I think that's how I see the human impact is we have to really completely change how we're thinking about healthcare. And you're part of the ecosystem too, right? Where how many times have we heard, you know, we want more access, better outcomes, lower cost, but nobody is going to feel the disruption of that, right? Well, guess what? Everybody who's in the ecosystem is going to have to look at their sacred cows or their sacred ways of doing things that we're going to have to change, whether it's the innovators and, quite frankly, even the consumers. You know, us as consumers of healthcare, there's a lot of problems in this country with healthcare. I'm not going to, but compared to other countries, we're kind of spoiled a little bit, I think. Like we want everything all the time, and that has to also change. So all of us are going to have to rethink a little bit differently. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I hear you.
Okay.
I think so. My next question actually is going to be a problem for you because I wanted could you talk a little bit more actually about your glucose measuring technology, in that it is becoming, as you described, ubiquitous. I currently actually have been using it. I was described as pre-diabetic, type 2 diabetes, et cetera. And went to the drugstore, got the prescription, easy as pie.
Yeah.
Just take it, slap it on, 2 weeks later, slap another one on. But it's not just slapping something on, it then connects you to actually another world in terms of measurement and understanding of your own body.
Yep.
And you're describing what's the next evolution of that you guys have been working on and are developing. Because I've been told, actually, I can't get my next Libre because it's running out. And so I've got to wait for Libre 2 to come out before I get my next one or something.
Well, we just opened a new facility in Ireland, in Kilkenny, to deal with it. So, and we have 2 facilities here in the United States, so we love everybody. We make our products everywhere. Like this, not. Yeah, I mean, I think this is an incredible technology, and I think one of the futures of healthcare when I talk about consumers taking more accountability for their health is how do we take that information and provide it to all of us. And so this is an interesting technology for people with diabetes. I think after insulin, it's probably one of the most important innovations in the field of diabetes. But what we learned was there's a lot of people that didn't have diabetes that wanted to use it and wanted to understand what was going on with their bodies, what was going on with their. So we launched a new system called Lingo. Okay, I'll make the pitch. HelloLingo.com, you can get it. No prescription necessary, but basically what it does is it helps everybody understand what's happening to your body with the creme brulee that you're eating now and all that. Now, you know that the creme brulee is bad. Like, you know that. You don't need a device to say, yeah, this is like, oh, I didn't know that the creme brulee was really sugary. But what it does is it packages the information and it provides you the information so that you can kind of get confronted with it in a way that allows you to do probably what is the most difficult of all human experiences, at least I find it, which is behavior change. Like, how do I change my behavior? So I think that's the next evolution. And these are I would call biowearables. So wearables today, they kind of sit on the skin. The biowearables will go in a little bit into the initial layer of the skin. You don't really kind of feel it. It's not painful, but it gives you continuous measurements, continuous. And I think that that's going to be another future in healthcare as we're all going to be using some of these things.
Yeah, I think it's great, because as I utilize the technology, I am a physician, so I kind of nerded out on it, right? Milligrams per deciliter, you can see the rise, and I'm thinking, well, if you're not a physician, if you don't understand this, does it really mean anything to you except the curve?
Yeah.
And how can you relate that curve to actually utilizing it for your health?
Right.
So you're describing a next generation, and that forget about the milligrams per deciliter, et cetera.
Yeah.
This is telling you creme brulee good, creme brulee bad.
Yeah.
And how you can actually look at your health to really make those determinations.
And it's also like there's definitely a segment of the population that's like you, that likes to geek out on the data and trend it all out. Others, majority, just like make it simple, make it easier for me. So one of the things we had to do actually was, if you take a lot of the Abbott engineers and the Abbott marketers were very focused on healthcare marketing and how to talk to doctors and be really geeked out. So we actually we hired a completely separate team. I didn't even let them stay in the same building. We got a separate building for them, and they're our consumer marketers, and their challenge is how to make this information relevant to, the average, Joe and Jane, who's like, okay, just give me like the simple 1, 2, 3 things that I need to know right now versus the geek out. So,
And you see that is that the future? That's part of the next future, really, healthcare or health.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one trend, I'd be remiss if I don't use the 2-letter magic AI word there, but you'll start to see these devices, and once you log and once the device gets to know you better, it'll know like, okay, it's Sunday, I know what you're going to do now, right? And I'm going to interject before you go there, because so we'll start to see them become even more smarter.
Great. We talked a little bit about COVID. You were appointed CEO in March of 2020, just as COVID was erupting. And Abbott played an incredible role in addressing the pandemic. As I mentioned, the creation of the test Binex Now. Could you talk about the approach you had in terms of how you led and that development, and how Abbott responded? You described the number of individuals that work at Abbott. How did you get them all around that concept and that work?
Yeah, well, let me just say it's like 5 years, and it's like a distant memory for a lot of us. And the piece that I think is a little disappointing for me is that we have snapped back to a lot of the things that we were doing. And I'm looking at Roberta now, who does a lot with healthcare. I think that that's probably one of the disappointments, and quite frankly, also to you, is that we lauded our healthcare workers. If you remember everything that we were doing, the pens and the lights and the flashes and all of that. And I was at an ER with a customer, and I was just watching the whole dynamic again, and it just came back to not really. So we should continue the same way we thanked healthcare workers and the healthcare systems back 5 years ago. We have to continue to kind of support and give thanks to our healthcare workers, because that's probably the disappointment that I've seen, is everything's kind of snapped back and we just take it for granted. I guess I would say, I took over and the company was in great shape, financially strong, great balance sheet, so we were good. We had good growth, and I had a great team of people that were there. I think that what I try to do is basically re-engage the employees to say, hey, we're on the 2-yard line here. Like, you're called in. This is why we're here. It's for moments like these. This is our big test. And there's going to be a lot of people that will be Netflixing and Amazon, but we're going to come in every day, and we're going to figure this out. And we did that. We had R&D teams split in 2, and they were working 24/7. So one group from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., other group coming in at 8 p.m., and just really re-engaging our employees to say, this is our mission. This is what we're here for. You're a healthcare company, the biggest healthcare crisis in a century. And our expertise was testing. We had a lot of people that were scientists that developed the first HIV test. That was huge because our blood supply was compromised, and to be able to have a test to protect the blood supply. So they were there, and they knew what had to be done. And so we basically had 4 different teams. Each team had manufacturing, clinical, all the different functions that you needed. And I was basically, I've said this publicly, I was chief broom officer. Just move anything away and just, my coin phrase was, I get it, here's your Gantt chart, here's how it makes total sense. If we had to do it by next week, what would have to be true? And it was just incredible when you took away a lot of the constraints that we usually have in a normal world, what people, like the creativity that people would have. And Abbott's a very financially disciplined company, and we took some risks because we had to. I remember going to see a supplier in Syracuse, New York, and it was this massive project that we were going to do with them, and I flew back, went into the CFO's office, and I said, Bob, I'm going to ask you to do something very uncomfortable. And he said, what's up? And he says, I need you to wire transfer $80 million to this guy. And he goes, okay, what are they going to do? And I said, well, they're going to do this. And he says, well, do we have a statement of work? I says, no, I got a handshake. But it was great. And so we did a lot of just non-conventional things. And I think that that's something I've tried to do is large companies, they're not destined to be slow and boring. We can do some pretty fast things, and that's probably what I've tried to do now is just make sure that we can do this. Remember, we did it, and but there's a little bit of snapback also in our culture too. So, but we try to do it like that, and then obviously it was in the middle of an election season, so there was a lot of politics involved in that too, and how to manage that. But I had a great board. We met on a regular basis every month, sometimes twice a month, and very supportive. They gave us a lot of go ahead, do it, and so we have a supportive board also. So
great. So a couple of things. When you look back on that time, any regrets?
I think the regret that I had was excuse me. So we sold a lot of tests around the world. We had a U.S. manufacturing for the U.S. and we had international for international demand. And we generated about $20 billion of revenue over 3 years. And we probably generated about 13 billion of cash. And I had wished, if I look back now, I had wished I'd made more investments in the other parts of the business. We let a lot of that flow to our shareholders, and that was very good. So, our stock rallied up very high, and then, over a period of 2 years after it, all of that kind of came down. So my regret was probably not investing more in we did investments, but we weren't rewarded, I'd say, more long-term for that business that we created with COVID. So I think more investment in the other part of the business. But outside of that, I think that we did a lot. I mean, I don't regret anything. That's my regret, but all the other stuff for me are just learnings. So yeah, we made mistakes, but those are just learnings.
Great. And during that time, how did you change your communication style? What have you kept? I assume you didn't travel as much, or was that still part of your game or part of your business?
We traveled
to do
a lot.
That?
Oh, yeah. Syracuse, Portland, Maine, and San Diego. That's where all the engineers and scientists were. So there was a lot going on there. You have to be communicating a lot with your board, communicating a lot with your employees. Like I said, these 4 teams, we met every single day. Every team had 1 hour. What do we accomplish? What needs to be done every single day? It was great because you get to meet a bunch of people that, you had no idea, you just got exposure to a bunch of talent. It was this great meeting where we were trying to figure out how to get 29 injection mold presses that probably weigh about 80 tons, about the size of a truck, from Narita Airport, Tokyo, to Syracuse, New York, and there's no planes. There's no United, there's no Lufthansa. So we're like, what needs to be true? And there's this like 27-year-old employee in the corner, and he just goes, well, we could get Antonovs. And I go, what's an Antonov? So it's those big Russian cargo planes, those who didn't know. So Google it. They're like, oh, wow, can we get these? I don't know. So come back. 2 hours, they come back, and it's like, yeah, we can get 7 of these. They cost $1 million each one, and we can get everything, into Syracuse on Sunday. And it was this 27-year-old, which now he's running big parts of the business now, just because he was. So I think that's always interesting. So that piece, I try to stay as close as possible to a lot of the operations and some of our R&D programs, because you got to make decisions, but at the same time you get exposed to a lot of key talent also. So
yeah,
I think
becomes that failure is not an option.
Yeah, I think everybody's running businesses. It's all about your team. It's all about your talent, and how can you, how do you have visibility to them, right? Because I think it comes down to the leaders to be able to stretch people, right? Because if you leave it up to the managers, sometimes, well, they need to do this, then they need to do this, then they need to do this, and it's like, okay, some people just need to be stretched, and they can surprise you.
So that's part of your view on talent. And how do you develop and support, how does Abbott, and how do you as the CEO think about the development of talent within your organization?
Well, I spend probably the equivalent of 2 months reviewing all the talent. So we have Abbott's got a lot of processes, so we have a process by which we do that. But it's really an opportunity to force the organization and the business leaders to talk about the organization, talk about the talent, and then we ultimately look at certain people and say, okay, this is what they need, and then you've got to force yourself to kind of do it, right? They need an international experience. Okay, great. How are we going to get that? Well, then you have to actually work to make sure that you create that international experience. So it's pretty intentional, I would say. And then a lot of it is I have the benefit because I get to sit across all the talent. So you get to see somebody who works in pharmaceuticals in Singapore and has got this incredible background and resume, and all of a sudden, 3 weeks before, you're talking with the diagnostics team and they're looking for somebody, and it's like, oh, wow. So I play this role to be able to actually link some of the talents together. So it's good.
How much time do you think you spend as the CEO in doing that work?
Like I said, it's about, so we've got 17 different business units. So we do all 17 business units in probably about 45, 60 days. So it's, yeah. Like, I know that sounds like, wow, 2 months out of the year. Yeah, 2 months out of the year, we're actually spending time looking at people and making decisions and being intentional about how we develop our talent.
Wow. So Abbott invests billions of dollars building new manufacturing facilities around the world.
Tariff war.
So what criteria are most important when you're selecting a site or a new facility?
It's not. I don't think it's what usually gets kind of displayed in media, like it usually gets displayed as like labor cost or taxes, and yeah, that's a consideration. But Abbott's view, and I inherited this a decade-old framework about how we think about our manufacturing, and I think it's served us very well, and it'll continue to serve us well now, which is the fundamental premise is that we want to put our manufacturing sites close to where our demand is. It provides obviously a lot of operational efficiencies and all of that, but the real reason that we've done that is that 60% of our $40 billion of revenue are overseas. We're probably one of the most international U.S. healthcare companies. And one of the challenges of having that kind of business overseas is that you have to translate those those profits back to U.S. dollars. And with a strong dollar, those revenues get shrunk. So one of the ways that we find to create a natural hedge to that is matching your cost structure with your revenues. So you still get impacted on the top line, but if your top line shrinks, so does your cost basis if you've got a strong cost basis there. So we've historically had that view of putting our manufacturing operations where we have sales, and we got big sales in places that not a lot of companies have businesses. I mean, we are the largest healthcare company in India, point blank. Like, American, Indian, we're the largest company. So we have a lot of manufacturing in India. Almost 98% of our revenues in India are sourced from our Indian manufacturing sites. And we're that big because our founder, Dr. Abbott, decided to become an international company and expanded into India in 1908. It's crazy. But we've got facilities in Pakistan. We have facilities in Singapore. It's all over the world. So that's the premise. And then you look at other aspects like labor costs, access to talent, and all regulatory. That's another key consideration too. As we look at what's going on for us, during our earnings a couple weeks ago, we basically reaffirmed our guidance for the full year, even though we had a few $100 million of impact, because a very large percent of our U.S. revenue is sourced from our U.S. manufacturing sites. We have about 35 manufacturing sites. One of them here is in Westford, just west of us, and then the other 65 manufacturing sites are all overseas. So we'll use that network to be able to move our manufacturing around wherever we need to. But so that's a general philosophy that we have. I think companies that have done that aren't really having that kind of impact. If you've concentrated everything in one area, then and then I'll make the pitch to the brothers and sisters over here. We have 10 facilities in Ireland, over 6,500 employees in Ireland, and we've been over there over 75 years in Ireland. And we find it a great place to want to do business. But we've got great colleagues from Ireland, from the north in Donegal all the way down to Kilkenny. So and those sites basically support most of Europe and some places of Asia.
So given just Abbott being this global entity, how do you deal with crisis? How is it managed within Abbott?
I think what we do is we jump on it and we set up teams and we roll up our sleeves. We don't tend to delegate too much of the work up front. So like on this one here, on tariffs, it was me, the CFO, the controller, and a couple of the finance people. Over the weekend, it was right over Masters. So I gave us the break to watch the play-off hole, but that was it. But everybody else was. So I think what we tend to do is we tend to jump on it, own it, be accountable to the crisis, and then obviously once we have a framework, then we'll bring in more people and then deploy yourself through all the different teams, right? And nowadays, obviously, PR is and media is an important element in that. So we tend to kind of bring them in the upfront piece.
Gotcha.
But ultimately, what I've learned is everybody's got their own. Media doesn't want to upset this type of constituency. The legal team doesn't want to upset that. So if you listen to everybody, we don't do anything. So ultimately you got to make the decision. But getting as many viewpoints as possible for me is important in crisis management.
Great. One more, and then we'll open it up. Key challenges that you're seeing in the healthcare industry as we move forward.
Well, I think one of them I talked about was access, and I think that's going to be everybody in the spectrum here: manufacturers, providers, payers, regulators, consumers. I think we're all going to have to change how we've been doing this. I'm thinking about it, and I describe what I think the innovators need to think about doing. But I think the other big one, and we were talking about this, is I've been having a lot of discussions about AI and impact of AI, and is it going to augment the workforce? Is it going to take over the workforce? And in my mind, it is fundamental for healthcare because by 2030, we're going to have a shortage of about 20 million healthcare workers around the world, and it's just going to get worse. So we're going to live longer because we're doing this incredible work, but there's not going to be people to take care of all of us. So I think that that's one big issue that we're going to have to confront, and we're going to have to change the way we're thinking about things. And our desire to have personalization is going to have to come also with a good dose of automation. And there are certain things that we're accustomed, like when you're on your phone, customer service, press 000 because I want to talk to somebody. Like, you might not be able to see people for certain things, and we're going to have to get accustomed to that. Now, the good thing is I think the new generation, younger generation, they're more accustomed to that, but I think we're all going to have to get accustomed. I think that's going to be one huge problem, is just the workforce, and which is why I said what I said on your COVID question, because just a lot of people are retiring, and there's not a new generation of healthcare workers coming up, so it's going to be a problem.
Where do you see AI fitting into the work you're doing?
So definitely diagnostics. So AI-based diagnostics, I think, is going to be big, and we're doing a lot of investments there. I think that there's going to be a lot of development. So we're going to shorten the time for development of new solutions with AI. So it's not so much on our side, on the pharmaceutical side, but diagnostics will be big. I think the biowearables, like I said, are going to be another kind of big trend, and I think site of care is going to be. I think we're all going to learn that there's going to be a lot more remote care going on, or ambulatory surgical centers, or smaller, more smaller, more focused kind of site of care kind of centers. So I think that's going to be another area that AI is going to be able to help too.
So we've got a few minutes. Love to open it up to the audience for any questions.
We've got the microphones coming around.
Great.
Roberta, I only saw your email like a couple hours ago, so I'm sorry.
Well, you can answer
But
that
thank you.
question
But-
later.
Thank you for
You're
the.
very welcome. You're very welcome. Great to see you. Always great to see you. And I think you've actually been very humble. Sort of, if I could speak on behalf, to some extent, of the diabetes community, lifesaver. Really a lifesaver during the pandemic. So thank you for that. I wanted to do a reality check about two things, because they might be music to my ears. One was, your end of the business is about the technology, right? More about the technology. There's also the drug innovation that has been taking place. And we're now at a point where between those two areas, we have the technology, the capability to really manage diabetes, which, at this point we think is affecting up to 1 in 10 people, at least, in the United States. We can't possibly afford it today. We can't buy enough of the stuff. Yep. So, and I appreciate what you said about your devices, but did I hear correctly from a true capitalist that you believe that we really need to rethink drug pricing and device pricing policy?
Oh, I think we have to absolutely do that, but I don't think, though, that you're going against, when you said kind of the capitalist, like Libre today, we launched it at, I think the price at the time, the competitor was doing $7,000 a year. We launched it at $1,000, and there was no research. We just thought it was a fair price, okay? But it is today my most profitable product.
That's great.
Okay, because you drive the scale, okay, you bring your costs down, okay, and so I don't think that you have to trade it off. So from an innovator's perspective, you still, listen, unfortunately, the business of healthcare, I will say, the biggest challenge I think a lot of companies have is how do you balance, it is a for-profit business, and if you don't have profit, you don't have mission, but how do you strike the balance on the other side, which is how do you get the access? And I think if you work with cost and design cost into the product design, I'll at least speak from a device perspective, we were able to do that at $1,000 because they designed cost into the product and how to think about how to do it. Our mantra was Fisher Price friendly and a latte a day. That was the specs to the R&D team, Fisher-Price Friendly latte a day, and we did not deviate from that until we got to the point where we said, okay, we got the right cost. So yeah, I do
That's
think,
awesome.
but I think everybody though, so when you were shocked to me hear say that, I think everybody in that ecosystem is going to have to look at what is their kind of like sacred cow, and that's how you're going to solve healthcare, is everybody looking at the sacred cow and saying, okay, we need to disrupt this in ourselves, and I think that's one way to solve it.
Awesome. So my second question, I'm curious about your rings. I'm not talking about your left hand. I'm talking about your right hand. Is that an Uru ring?
No.
Oh well.
It is another, I'm testing them all out. I think they're interesting. Yes, I do. Yeah, it's
I just wondered if you're starting to think about integration there too.
Yep, yeah, we are. Yeah, we are.
Great news.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Just to add an Irish voice to the, to the audience. Really interesting discussion, thank you, and fascinating what you're saying about healthcare. I'm interested in what you said about innovation and how that links into your talent strategy. Because you seem to give the impression that, you know, one of your expertise is picking this expert from this silo and putting them into a different silo and making those two areas work together to create innovation. Did I understand you correctly? Is that right? How important is all of that kind of mixing of disciplines across the wide span of your 17 businesses?
Yeah, I did. The only thing I did not say is I don't consider myself an expert in anything. Michelangelo said at 87, ancora imparo, I'm still learning. So I think if he felt that way, I think we should all feel that way too. No, I think that it's important to, I mean, it's difficult to move certain people. If you're a specialist in doing, you know, pharmaceutical development, you know, your ability to go and do, you know, medical technology, there's some different skill sets. So on the pure inventive side, I think what you've got to do for each group is just make sure they've got the resources and the push and the drive. But there are some areas that you can kind of cross-collaborate and move, so regulatory, clinical, that are an important part of the whole innovation process is important, and even manufacturing too. I mean, we use 3 questions. Is it a need and is it sustainable? Like, are we going to do, right? Can we make it with cost and the quality that's needed and at scale, and who's going to pay for it and why? Like, you got to answer those 3 questions every single time. So it doesn't matter what you are in the company, like, you should be able to answer those 3 questions in any one of your innovation kind of programs, and continuously ask that question throughout the whole process. So
One more? One more?
Hi, thanks so much for joining. My name is Odette Leonardo. I'm the Dean of the Law School at Boston College. It's a pleasure to be here. I was curious about how you are thinking about the relative disinvestment in frontline research at universities that's happening in the US right now, and whether that's shaping your thinking, short run, long run. Just curious about your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult time for sure, and we hear that a lot. We've got a lot of partnerships across the academic side. I think, like, fundamentally, I think that's the best model, and you saw that during COVID. Academia, public, and private, when those 3 come together, I mean, nothing. It's really unstoppable, the force that you can do. So it is concerning to kind of see what's going on. It's not changing our view in terms of will that still be a viable part of our strategy. I think what it's changing is, okay, are there areas that we're going to have to step up, the private side step up even more to be able to offset whatever ends up happening. I am an optimist, and I think that we can still be hopeful, because right now there are some real, but there's a lot of noise too. So I think if where we settle out is where the noise is, then I think private enterprise will step up, and I think you'll see that. I think that will be an interesting opportunity for private to step up also. But I'm also hopeful that trifecta there remains strong. So.
Okay. Any other questions? One more?
Really quick, Kate Gregory, Dean of BC Nursing. I just really want to thank you for your shout out to the healthcare workforce. Nurses, as you know, are the largest segment of the healthcare workforce, and I'm really curious as you bring forward these technologies, how we can think about the future of education and readying this healthcare workforce for interfacing with all the great work Abbott's doing.
Yeah. I think it's just we've got to make sure, whether it's through fellowship programs and all of that, and I think the industry does that a lot. We just got to continue to do that and find even more opportunities to educate the nurse and other fellows on the new innovation that's coming. So yeah.
Great. Robert, thank you.
Thanks.
Fabulous.